I pulled into the long-term parking lot at Toronto Pearson just after sunrise, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my chest buzzing with excitement. I hadn't told my son I was coming. I wanted it to be a surprise. His birthday. A simple plan. Fly in from Vancouver, grab breakfast together, maybe watch the boys open their gifts. A good day. That's what it was supposed to be. As I stepped out of the car, cold March air biting through my jacket, I noticed a silver Toyota Corolla a few rows down. The windows were fogged from the inside. That alone felt strange. Then I saw movement. I walked closer. My heart stopped. There, curled up in the back seat under a single worn blanket, were two small bodies, children, and in the front seat, slumped forward with his head against the steering wheel, was my son, Ethan. My son Ethan was sleeping in his car with his twin boys, Caleb and Noah, barely 5 years old, crammed beside him in an airport parking lot. I knocked on the window. Ethan's eyes flew open, wild at first, then confused, then locked onto mine. For a moment he didn't move, just stared at me through the glass. And then I saw it, something I had never seen on my son's face before. Shame. He unlocked the door and stepped out quietly so he wouldn't wake the boys. "Dad," he whispered, his voice rough, like it hadn't been used much lately. "What are you doing here?" I felt my throat tighten. "I came to see you. What are you doing here?" He looked away. "Ethan," I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay calm. "Where's the house? Where's Laura? Why are my grandsons sleeping in a car?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" I snapped before I could stop myself. "Your children are sleeping in a parking lot in March." That's when Caleb stirred. He pushed himself upright, hair sticking out in every direction, and squinted at me. "Grandpa?" he said softly. Something cracked open in my chest. "Hey, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. "How about you and Noah come with Grandpa and get some breakfast?" Ethan hesitated. "Dad, let me handle this," I said quietly, "just for a little while." An hour later, the boys were happily demolishing pancakes at a Tim Hortons inside the terminal, syrup everywhere, laughing like nothing in the world was wrong. Ethan sat across from me, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. "Tell me everything," I said. He took a long breath, like he'd been holding it for months. "Laura left 3 months ago," he said. "But she didn't just leave, she took everything." I frowned. "What do you mean, everything?" "The house, the accounts, the company money, all of it." "That house was in both your names." "She had me sign paperwork, said it was for tax restructuring. I trusted her." My stomach sank. One day I came home and the locks were changed. There was a restraining order waiting for me. Her lawyer said I was unstable, dangerous. "That's insane. You've never even raised your voice at your kids." "I know, but they had proof, or at least claimed they did. Texts I supposedly sent, emails, friends who said they'd seen me acting erratic. Her parents backed everything up." "And the business?" I asked, dread already pooling in my gut. "She controlled the accounts," Ethan said. "The day before she filed the order, she transferred the money, all of it, to her father's account, called it a loan." My hands clenched into fists. "The money I invested?" "Gone." I sat back, stunned. "What about the boys?" I asked. His voice dropped. "I lost custody. I get supervised visits twice a week. Her mother watches, takes notes. The judge said I needed stable housing and income first." "But you can't get housing without money," I said slowly. He nodded. That was the point. I looked at my son, thinner than I remembered, exhausted, beaten down, and something inside me hardened. "This ends now," I said. Ethan shook his head. "Dad, you don't understand. Her family has money, lawyers, connections." I leaned forward. "Maybe you can't fight them alone, but you're not alone anymore." That night, after the boys were asleep in my hotel room, I sat at the desk and started making calls. And that was when the fight really began. By morning, I already had a notebook filled with names, numbers, and half-formed plans. While Ethan slept beside his sons, I sat near the window, watching planes lift into the gray Toronto sky, and made the first call. "Daniel Foster," I said when the line connected. "I need the best family lawyer in Ontario, immediately." Daniel had been my lawyer in Vancouver for decades. He knew my voice, knew when something was wrong. "Slow down, Martin," he said. "What's happened?" I told him everything. The car, the boys, the restraining order, the money transfers. When I finished, there was silence. "This isn't just family court," Daniel finally said. "If half of this is true, it's coordinated financial abuse. You need someone who handles high-conflict custody and forensic finance." He gave me a name, Elaine Mercer. Expensive, relentless, brilliant. I booked the meeting that same morning. Elaine was sharp-eyed, mid-40s, no wasted words. She listened without interrupting as Ethan told his story again, hands shaking, voice cracking. When he finished, she leaned back. "This is a textbook case of coercive control," she said. "They isolated him, stripped his resources, then painted him as unstable so the court wouldn't question it." "Can we prove it?" I asked. She tilted her head. "That depends. Do you have anything at all? Bank records, emails, transfer confirmations?" "I have the wire receipt from my investment," I said, "and emails between Ethan and early clients." "Good," she said. "We'll start there. I also want his medical records. They're claiming mental instability." Ethan nodded. "I was seeing a therapist last year." Elaine smiled faintly. "Perfect. That usually destroys their narrative." Within days, the machine was moving. I rented a furnished 3-bedroom apartment in Mississauga. Nothing flashy, clean, safe, close to a school. We enrolled Caleb and Noah immediately. Their teachers reported they were polite, curious, happy, no behavioral issues, no fear. Ethan landed a job with a tech firm run by a former colleague who vouched for him without hesitation. "Unstable?" the man scoffed. "Ethan was the calmest person I've ever worked with." Elaine filed an emergency motion to modify custody, citing stable housing, employment, and the children's well-being. At the same time, she hired a forensic accountant named Victor Lamb. Victor was meticulous, quiet. He disappeared into spreadsheets and resurfaced weeks later with a report that made my blood cold. "They drained the company slowly," Victor explained. "Small transfers at first, then larger ones, all routed through personal accounts before landing with Laura's father, Richard Hale." "How much?" Ethan asked. $270,000, Victor said, "including your father's investment." "This isn't negligence," Victor continued. "It's embezzlement." Elaine didn't hesitate. She forwarded the report to the police fraud unit and the CRA. Meanwhile, supervised visits continued. Laura's mother, Margaret, sat in the corner every time with a notebook, eyes sharp, pen scratching constantly. What she didn't realize was that Ethan recorded every visit, perfectly legal, signposted, shared space. The recordings told a very different story than Margaret's notes. The boys laughed, hugged their father, climbed into his lap, talked about school, cartoons, bedtime stories. Yet Margaret's written reports described aggression, withdrawal, emotional instability. Elaine smiled when she heard them. This is gold. She subpoenaed the so-called witnesses who'd backed Laura's claims. One admitted under oath she'd never personally seen Ethan act erratically. She'd heard about it. Another neighbor conceded he'd never heard threats, only saw Ethan look upset through a window. Then Elaine went deeper. "I'd called an old friend from Toronto police, Detective Karen Doyle, who owed me a favor from years back. She ran a background check on Richard Hale. She's clean on paper, she said, but she's been flagged twice for suspicious deposits, and 3 years ago, fraud lawsuit, settled, sealed. Elaine used that pattern carefully, not as accusation, as context. The custody hearing was scheduled for July, 6 months after I'd found my son sleeping in a car. The courtroom was packed. Laura sat stiffly beside her lawyer, Brent Caldwell, confidence etched into her posture. Her parents flanked her. Ethan sat beside me, pale, determined. Elaine stood and dismantled their story piece by piece. The forged texts, the financial transfers, the therapist's notes, the recordings, the false witness testimony. When Laura took the stand, her confidence cracked. "Where is the loan agreement?" Elaine asked. "It was verbal," Laura said. "For nearly $300,000? Silence. "Why were the transfers made without your husband's knowledge?" "He knew." Elaine slid phone records across the table. "No contact that day. None." Laura's voice wavered. Then came the screenshots. "These images," Elaine said calmly, "were created on a computer, not a phone." The judge leaned forward. Laura swallowed hard. I don't know how that happened." By the time Elaine finished, the courtroom felt different, heavy, like the truth had finally settled. The judge took a long pause, and then she spoke. The courtroom was silent enough to hear someone breathe. Judge Eleanor Whitfield adjusted her glasses and looked down at the document spread across her bench. She didn't rush. She reread sections, flipped pages, and made careful notes. Every second stretched. Finally, she looked up. "Mrs. Hale," she said, her voice steady but firm, "I have reviewed the forensic accounting reports, the digital analysis of the alleged text messages, the audio recordings from supervised visitation, and the testimony presented today." Laura's hands clenched in her lap. "I find it deeply troubling that serious allegations of mental instability and violence were brought before this court without credible evidence," the judge continued. "Even more troubling is the pattern of financial transfers from a jointly owned business without documentation, consent, or transparency." She turned toward Ethan. "Mr. Reeves, the therapist records provided by Dr. Amanda Collins show no indication of instability. On the contrary, they demonstrate a responsible individual seeking support during a stressful period." Ethan's shoulders shook. The judge paused, then delivered the words that changed everything. "This court orders an immediate modification of custody." Laura gasped. Her mother half stood before being waved back down. "Joint legal custody will be shared equally. Physical custody will be split 50-50. Supervised visitation is terminated, effective immediately." Ethan covered his face with both hands. I grabbed his arm to keep him steady. The judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, this court orders repayment of $270,000 to Mr. Reeves, representing funds improperly removed from the business. Failure to comply within 90 days will result in asset seizure." She looked directly at Laura. "And finally, this matter is referred to the Crown Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution related to fraud and financial misconduct." The gavel came down. "We are adjourned." Ethan collapsed into the chair, sobbing. Not the loud kind, the quiet, broken kind that comes when someone has been holding themselves together for too long. In the waiting room, Caleb and Noah were coloring under a social worker's watch. When they saw Ethan, they dropped everything and ran. "Daddy!" Noah shouted. Ethan dropped to his knees and pulled them into his arms. "Are we going home now?" Caleb asked. "Yes," Ethan whispered. "We're going home." 3 months later, Richard Hale was formally charged with fraud and tax evasion. Laura accepted a plea deal, Full repayment, probation, no jail. The money came back in pieces. Legal fees took their share, but enough remained to rebuild. Ethan restarted his life carefully this time. New company, independent accounts, lawyers on every contract. The boys split time between both parents, but they were with Ethan more often than not. Laura seemed distracted, hollowed out by her own choices, present but distant. I stayed in Toronto. I rented a condo near Ethan's place. 3 days a week, I picked up Caleb and Noah from school. We went to the park, built Lego towers. I taught them chess. They beat me more often than they should. One evening, about a year after that morning in the parking lot, Ethan and I sat on my balcony while the boys played inside. "I never thanked you," he said quietly. "You don't have to." "I do," he insisted. "If you hadn't shown up, I'd still be in that car, or worse. I thought I was the problem. I believed them." I nodded. "That's what people like them do. They make you doubt reality." He stared out at the city lights. "The court believed them. Everyone did, except you." "I know, my son. I always have." He smiled, eyes wet. "I want to be that kind of father. You already are." From inside, Noah yelled, "Grandpa, come play Jenga." I stood. "Duty calls." Ethan laughed. I sat with my grandsons as they stacked wooden blocks higher and higher. The tower wobbled. "Don't let it fall," Caleb warned. "I won't," I said, steadying it. And I meant it. Not just the game, not just the moment. I meant my family. We don't let each other fall.